All right, welcome everybody to brand new monthly webinar from Talented Learning. This is our 81st thought leadership webinar on a monthly basis that we've done, and I'm not biased at all when I say this is going to be the best. The title today is 6 things that will kill your LMS, and 3 companies that got it right. And I'm John Lay from Talented Learning. I'm joined by a whole host, including Lars Hyland, of experts in learning technology. And so we've got a great hour lined up for you today. And so let me introduce the team here first. So if you can advance that, Lars, one. We'll introduce the team from the right to the left. And we'll start off with our friends from Western Union. Many of you may have been introduced to Tomas and Ramontis here last week on the Talented Learning Show, as we had them as guest experts on the podcast. We learned a lot about it, and we're going to continue digging deeper today. But Tomas Lanikis, excuse me, is the senior manager of the global agent training team at Western Union. And he has got a long pedigree of working with LMSs now, almost 15 years, and has done everything from racking servers to building integrations to configuring, migrating data, and even taking customer support. Truly expert practitioner with some deep experience. And he spent the last 10 years building and developing the global team that, as you'll hear about today, is doing some pretty special things with learning technology on a global basis. Tomas, welcome back to Talented Learning. Nice to have you.
Thanks, John. Thanks. Pleasure to be with you guys.
Outstanding. And Ramontis Yuknis is the manager of that same global account technology team. And Ramontis has a software engineering degree that's well over a decade old, and he spent more than a decade now working at Western Union in multiple capacities of LMS administrator all the way up to a manager right now, managing this global deployment. Has a wealth of experience. His most recent project was working with the team to transition from one LMS to another with over 300 or almost 400,000 end users. So between Tomas and Ramontis, we've got some practitioner experts here today. Ramontis, welcome back.
Hey, John. Good to be back.
All right, great. And then, of course, we have Lars Hyland, who is the Chief Learning Officer at Totara Learning. Lars is a well-known quantity here at Talented Learning, being a former star guest experts here on webinars and podcasts. But more importantly, Lars, as Chief Learning Officer, has an advocate role to drive the adoption of the Totara Enterprise open source system across the whole world through expert partners. Lars has uniquely experience on both the buyer, the practitioner side, and now on the vendor side. Really one of the most experienced professionals in the world on enterprise learning technology, and as we love here at Talented Learning, extended enterprise learning technology. So Lars, welcome back.
Thank you very much, John. Delighted to be here again.
Outstanding. So let's go ahead and we'll show you what we're going to talk about, get a quick overview from Western Union, and we'll get into the meat of the presentation. So from an agenda standpoint, finally, I'm John Lay. I'm the lead analyst of Talented Learning, and what Talented Learning, or what I've done in my career now, I've now have 25 years in learning technology, and 14 of those years were in enterprise learning management sales. And for the last 8 years, I founded and now have grown Talented Learning to study the learning systems marketplace. And generally, we make or earn our revenue by helping our clients determine what they need and from a learning management system standpoint, and help them buy. So I'm on the front lines of watching organizations do it right and wrong my entire career. And but this last year has taught anything to all of us, is that change and adaptability is paramount in learning technology. And so just by the nature of the flow of leads and questions across our desks here at Talented Learning, what we found is that lots and lots of organizations aren't prepared for adaptability, for molding and change, certainly not the level that we've got in the last year. But what we found is that many organizations were, and many organizations used the last year as an opportunity to thrive and grow, not take a couple steps back, to take a couple steps forward. And that's what was the generation of creating this webinar today, is to help you through 6 things that we see organizations hit the wall on with their learning management system or their learning technology, and how you can mitigate that through a variety of strategies. And we're going to give you those strategies in terms of talking about the typical warning signs, how to spot the problem, what that manifests in, what's the benefit of doing it right. We're going to look at it from Lars's perspective. We're going to look at it from the Western Union perspective. And we're going to ask 6 different poll questions of the audience so that we can thread that all into the conversation. Throughout the presentation, please submit questions in the chat or in the question pane, and we'll answer them. Worst cases, we'll get to them after the webinar is over. Personally, we'll answer your questions if we don't. So don't be shy about asking, and let's get going. All right, so the 6 most lethal things, implementation, threats. Lars, take it away.
Well, let's start with number 1. The LMS doesn't mold to your organization. So what do we mean by that? Well, as we know, the world around us is full of unpredictability and uncertainty, and well, boy, we've been through a real tough 12 months, and increasingly that level of uncertainty is only going to grow, even as we get to grips with the pandemic. But if we just put that to one side, if you ask ourselves as organizations, what happens when we get restructures or mergers or we acquire other businesses? This has an impact on your tech structure, your IT structure, and particularly how you support your people in terms of the LMS and other tools as part of your HR and learning ecosystem. What happens when you extend outside the business? So you want to start reaching audiences outside of your employees. Maybe they're extended employees, who are contractors, and they need different types of privileges to access similar types of learning. Or going beyond that, looking at resellers, networks, or even your supply chain, or even your customers. And I know, John, you're particularly focused on extended enterprise, so I'm sure we'll touch on that again. And just realizing that if the technology or the LMS that you have can't actually shape around those changes around your organization, you're going to be left with clunky workarounds, both manual, the trusty spreadsheet comes out again to shift data around, and you waste time and it kills productivity. And in fact, you may even get the dreaded tumbleweed through your LMS experience. People just don't use it in the way that you anticipated or expected.
Yeah, without a doubt. The easiest way to spot if your LMS isn't molding to you is if you're using spreadsheets. So if there's an in-between step, something's not molding right, is what we found. So let's go ahead and ask a poll question. What is the most useful? So let me launch this quickly. Let's do it this way. What is the most useful way your LMS molds to your organization or can mold to your organization? Is it, think of from a functionality standpoint, is it via groups and organization management, or is it around how you utilize roles and permissions? Is it about molding more about integration into your existing ecosystem, or even the notifications that get generated and distributed out through the system? Or is molding more about customization? And finally, in all these, if we can't list everything here, so put it in the chat pane or the question pane if you think molding is something else. We're going to leave this open, so go ahead and take your time to do that while we ask before we'll ask the question, Tomas or Montes, can you first start off by saying, just giving a high-level overview of who Western Union is, and then what do you think is the most useful way that an LMS can mold your organization? So, Tomas, you want to take that one?
Yeah, thank you, John. So it's really difficult question to answer, I would say, and thinking about Western Union, it's a huge organization, and who knows our business model, what we do is money transfer in minutes, basically around the globe, from any country to any country. So in order to facilitate that, Western Union has to maintain and has around 500,000 of what we call agent locations around the globe. So these are quite a lot. So these can be your local post office, these can be a grocery store next to you, or mom and pop store really in your neighborhood. So and of course banks. So maintaining that amount of people working in these 500,000 locations is really our end goal, to train them to make sure that they are compliant with all the local regulations, that they are fully aware how to operate the POS system, and how to spot any kind of suspicious activity. What we call is basically if somebody's trying to send money on someone else's behalf, or if there is potential for human trafficking or counterfeit goods or anything like that. So there's a lot of compliance things we have to take into account as a company to be able to operate in the financial services.
Great. And out of this list, Tomas, what do you think was, when you look back at your last few years of rolling this out to every country in the world, anything on this list stand out as the most important thing about that you needed to mold to your organization?
Yeah, John, thanks. I think when we were launching with Totara, that was a year and a half ago, our main, the selling points for Totara were, compared to our previous experiences, is that in certain scenarios, you don't really need a corporate LMS/talent management system. You need the right tool for the right thing. I mean, you need the right tool for the thing. So it was really an easy decision for us to go with Totara as a product. We have had previous experience with LMSs. We'll have combined experience of 25 years or so, but we've been through many of them during our lifetime, our careers. And really, it was quite an easy solution to go with Totara because of the main selling points, and let me name them. So right now, we are operating as a company in more than 200 countries and territories. So wherever we have the presence of our training, we need to serve the local language. That was the biggest selling point for Totara as the system, because it did have everything pretty much out of the box. With our previous experience, it never was the case. We had to build our own language packs, sideload them into the system, and that was a really big burden we had to undertake. The other thing I want to highlight is really Totara is the LMS in its core. And keeping that in mind, I want to outline the thing that, as a company, making a decision, if there is somebody not technical, an executive, give me a couple of proposals, let's go with the best price, but they never dig into the details. What the system does, how it does, is it easy to integrate? How much will it cost down the road to maintain the system? So all of those things we were able to evaluate, and because of our previous expertise and knowledge, I would say, and of course the partnership that we have had implementing Totara. So I would say the language support, and that it's an LMS in its core system, in its core, and it does the right things the way we needed it, and it does integrate also the ways we needed it.
Outstanding. Great answer. Let's see what the audience said. We had a variety, but number one, integration for sure. And so that doesn't surprise me at all. Let me close this poll here as we get to the next one, and go ahead and advance that, Lars. When I look as organizations come across our desk and needing help, and why did they hit the wall? Which of those things what I see a lot is the ability to manage groups and organizations as one of the ones that people don't know about or think about so much up front. But with the pandemic, we went on a poll question. We had about 1,000 respondents answer it, and something like 70% of them said they had to support additional audiences because of the pandemic that they weren't counting on. And so that ability to not just another employee audience, but maybe prospects, prospective customers or partner and channel, or maybe because of a merger and acquisition, but not fleshing that out as Tomas was describing in advance, left them unprepared, unable to adapt when things changed so quick. But it's the lesson really of working on defining your requirements appropriately. So let's go on to number 2. The other thing that organizations seem to hit the wall on all the time is just the generic nature of the LMS interface. And so there's lots and lots of learning management systems out there, as you probably know, hundreds or thousands. And one thing that most of them have in common is this generic look and feel of really just showing that it's the same for all clients, it's the same for all deployments, it's the same, that very generic look and feel. Is that an acceptable step? Is that a place to get going? Sure. And sometimes it's even mandatory to do there. But what we've seen is organizations hate this so much over time, the inability to change it as it drives a new purchase, just this number point alone, because it doesn't integrate to the look and feel, or it's not integrated into the unified flow that an organization wants. So at first, just getting training out there, checking a box is cool and sufficient, but over time, it's not, and organizations outgrow that and hit the wall. So something else certainly that you want to be considering. But Lars, I know you have a lot of experience down this vein. What are your thoughts on this?
Sure. LMSs, I think, and the ability to really make it feel your own makes a big difference to the audience's experience and reception in the main. So the more flexibility and ability to sort of deeply theme the solution, I think, makes a world of difference to, particularly when you're launching it afresh, if it feels familiar, if it feels your own, and particularly when you're reaching out to audiences that maybe not your immediate internal audience, but going outside your company and in an extended enterprise fashion, then being able to really represent your brand as you would you do in your websites and other types of external systems. That ability to unify that completely is I think a real benefit.
Yeah.
So it's a real challenge if it's too generic, and it can put people off, I guess, at the first hurdle, but wrongly, I'd say. I mean, clearly it's what flows through it that matters most, but even their content itself, if you don't take the time to make that your own, that's also another aspect of this too.
Yeah, I think with people so experienced now and working on their cell phones, mobile devices, laptops, going to all the world's best sites, social media, e-commerce sites, the level of expectation in 2021 is way up here in terms of what people are expected from a UI standpoint. In comparison to maybe even 5 years ago, where things are different. So what are those levels? Take a look at this. Everybody answer this one. So how about you rate your LMS, please, in terms of the depth and branding you can or did apply? And so in terms of the heat scale here, the lowest or most common is the one I was describing before. It's the same look and feel. Which one applies to you? It's you're using the same LMS that they provided out of the box. Or do you go a little bit further to medium heat where you start to brand with your logo and your colors, and it might look different than your website, but at least it's got the same theming and feel? Or do you have like a high level where you're doing things scary like managing CSS code and creating different learning pages so that it's really not generic, but even based on prospects or customers versus employees, or CSS code is where you're actually moving things around to make it look more like your website or intranet site, or are you in the infernal zone where you're just taking the whole front end off and you're putting your own developed front end and just using APIs to communicate with the back end? Answer that. Let's see where everybody is here. I see every one of these scenarios in my daily life, so nothing is wrong for sure. But I'll go ahead and close this out. We'll hold on before we show the results, because I think, Lars, you have a question for Western Union? Yeah, you do.
Yeah, Romantis, what was your decision on how to brand your LMS environment?
Yeah, this was an interesting point, but it basically stand on the two things for our decision. Of course, the official branding rules that we have, I guess the most of the companies have it, so we definitely have to follow that to make it familiar with every user, that they know that they are in Western Union site, of course. And the other one comes from knowledge of our audience and all the experience. And for that, it's basically our golden rule that we applied. You doing the UI, it's simple as possible. So since our audience is like not looking for training, they usually forced to do the training. So at least this part, what we're trying to achieve is at least this part should be as simple as possible. So no distractions, no anything, just to go to the content that is important for you at the moment, do it, and you're free to go with your daily work. So, and the combination with Totara LMS and the partner that we worked with really helped out on this one, because we not even were able to get the custom themes from the vendor, but we also retain the ability to use CSS, HTML inside if we need little tweaks there and there along the way.
Wow, great. It must be so challenging to find the least common denominator across an audience so big and diverse and in so many different languages and countries. I bet you constantly fret about that if you're doing that right. To make it look. But let's take a look at just what everybody else said. So certainly there's plenty of us here that are starting off from where you start off standpoint. But look at this, 65% logo and colors. That looks like that's table stake, Lars. And then the 28% and the 7% is where this is where adaptability and molding really comes into play. This is they're without knowing anything about you folks in the 28 and 7%, yeah, what I do know is that you don't go through that unless it's super critical reason to do so. What do you think, Lars?
Well, I think what Western Union have managed to do with Totara and in conjunction with their partner Synergy Learning has been to, it's not all about making it look all overly sophisticated, shall we say. So I like the fact that it's taking something and making it really simple and fit for purpose, because that's what I think means that your audience will know where to go, how to find things, and act as they need to. And that's really what we were looking for, I think, is as friction-free a learning experience as possible, whether that be in a mandated environment as Western Union are in particular, or whether it's you have to be more persuasive. So when you're being more persuasive, it's optional types of learning and training up to an extended audience, say, then your brand really needs to sort of sing along with it to sort of help that process along, arguably. So just to finish on some thoughts here, the questions that are popping up on the screen for the audience, these are questions that you could reflect on with any vendor that you might want to talk to around provision of a learning management system, and to really check that, can you apply your branding and design in the way that is important for you as a business, and then how would you be able to adapt that and change that as you need to post-launch, because sometimes it can be done as part of an initial implementation, but then it can get really costly and difficult to do subsequently. So so what sort of flexibility do you have down the track?
Great, thank you.
Good.
All right, moving on, number 3.
Let's move on to number 3. Okay, so we've already covered this in the original poll, it came up in the original poll about integrating, and a real killer for an LMS is if it's an island in its own right and it doesn't interconnect with anything else inside your organization. I mean, historically, I think there's been plenty of stories about LMSs being built and launched and implemented, and it's like you're trying to bring the horse to water, as it were, and no one's coming because it doesn't appear anywhere else inside the sort of ecosystem of the organization. So no wonder you get, as I call it, the tumbleweed moments, where just nothing happens, and no learning gets done, at least through the LMS. So here, I think it's really critical to think carefully about how open the architecture is of the technology that you're bringing into your organization, and that that's really at the heart of your organization becoming much more agile and flexible ultimately, because all of your systems are becoming much more fundamental to your very existence as an organization. Indeed, as the whole sort of digitalization process has marched on, we're all becoming software companies, really, no matter what sector we're in. So integrations come in all sorts of forms here, don't they, John? And, we could ask.
Yeah, more and more so. Here's another limitation of GoToWebinar, in that we can't list 20 here. But as we open up this poll, just curious, what do you folks have your LMS integrated into? Table stakes are HR or HRIS systems, sync users and employees. New systems that are becoming increasingly important in LMS implementations are with CRM like Salesforce or HubSpot, customer support systems. Certainly, what's never gone away is the need to integrate with performance and talent management and other HR type systems in the employee development. 2021 virtual classrooms are huge. Go ahead and question or chat. Go ahead and put what other ones that you integrate in your organization. The point being, as we'll stop here and look at the results in general here, as we ask the Western Union folks what they integrate with, but you can just see how it's spread almost evenly. Certainly virtual training has. The audience has a big focus on that, of course, in 2020 and 2021. But the key point is that the integrations themselves for every LMS deployment are different. They are, it's one of the hardest parts of my job, is to understand what that ecosystem is. But the ecosystem for every organization is different. It's not just that they have an HR and SS single sign-on, but they might have some HR system you never heard of and some single sign-on system that you never heard of. And so every organization has to do that. And they might have a CRM that's different than Salesforce. And so when you take all the different combinations of organizations, it tends to be a scary, hairy ecosystem that can exist. And the theme that we have in this webinar is the ability to mold into that ecosystem. And one way to do that is through the main way to do that is through the integrations. And so I'm never surprised by how many or the diversity of integrations. What I do know is that it's never the same. I've never had the same ones from client to client. It just always changes. So the ability to adapt to that change as a deployer of your own LMS system is paramount. From an integration standpoint, Ramontis or Thomas, actually, what's you were talking about POS before. What's that mean, and what else do you have integrated?
Yeah, John. So let me elaborate a little bit on POS. So Western Union point of sale system, POS, point of sale. So that is a system that every single what we call agent location has installed in order to record or pay out a money transfer. Our main product. So talking about APIs, while you guys were talking, I was thinking to myself about integration. It's very, very broad term. Some define integrations as batch jobs, sending data files, over network in batches. For us, integrations was more like API real-time integrations we're looking into. And from those options we have listed there, we have kind of a blend and something outside of it. And talking about those, our HRIS, we have something like this, but it's not HRIS. Our main audience are not our employees. These are our fellow agents that are selling our products around the globe. So we have a system of record for every single one of them, and this system feeds our LMS with who is supposed to get what training. So the logic that is who gets what kind of training is in our core systems, but the LMS receives that data and creates a user, assigns all the proper training automatically. And that's what we are super happy about. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the single sign-on, and that relates to the POS you brought up. So in order for our learners to go into the LMS, to log in and do the training, we have certain integration. It's based on single sign-on, but the beauty of it is that they are getting notifications when their certification is about to expire. They start getting the notification, they have a single sign-on link, they click it, they're instantly logged into the LMS, they are presented their mandatory training they have to go through, and once complete, it just gets synced across the systems automatically. And talking about APIs, I'd like to highlight that even though every single LMS has APIs or integration capability, not every single one of them is built equal. So it's a very important thing. It's when you go down that road and you figure out that it's really, you're missing something critical that you really need to in order to support your business case, that you need to serve, I don't know, simply speaking, in order to avoid spreadsheets, what you guys brought up before, to avoid spreadsheets, you have to have integrations. And so far, with a couple of custom developments, we've been able to achieve what we need. And it's really great experience so far. And yeah, and again, with Totara, the beauty of it is that we can share our code base that we pay for development, or we develop ourselves. And we also get what the other customers have developed internally. And this is how we were able to achieve it so fast.
Wow.
The level of integrations that allows, 8 people to serve the whole system, the whole user base of 400,000 learners, and within more than 50 countries. Or Rimantas, you can correct on the number of this one. How many countries we serve.
Yeah, how about that? How about that? Just if you didn't have that integrated, you'd need a team of 100 across all those countries to try to pull this
the whole
together. So to weigh on just in types of integrations, you mentioned batch. They can be real time. They can just be driven by the APIs, so that you can use the vendors provided instructions essentially to hook up the systems. They can be productized, which in real common ones like virtual classrooms, you can just turn them on or off without any. Or as Tomas mentioned, they can be open source, which is a big advantage here of the Totara platform, in that it doesn't have to be you. It could be any of 1,000 customers developing something that can be reused later. So those are just 5 types. That's probably not all of them of APIs, but sorry, Lars, please take it away.
There's a lot. I think one integration, I think we're probably going to agree, is one of the key drivers, I think, of any future procurement of a learning management platform, or any type of technology if we're broadening it out. So it's worth dwelling on, I think. I mean, there's a few questions here on the screen here that again could be asked when you are in that situation. Can I what are the APIs? What is the range available to me? What can I import, export? Can I custom integrate as well? So that really talks to being more open in terms of closer to the metal, as it were, of the code itself, and balancing out, the drivers behind your business change requirements, and also the need to keep in lockstep with future developments of the LMS platform itself. And then, yeah, does it support SSO or shared authentication? That type of question. Now, speaking on what is available on my LMS, then well, we need to look at a roadmap, don't we? And the vendor roadmap. And there's plenty of instances where that roadmap may take certain bits, it may support certain businesses very, very well at a point of time. And so you sort of enter into that arrangement with them, but then you become quite chained to that if that roadmap doesn't give you much leeway. So if that roadmap or that functionality set doesn't actually offer sufficient flexibility in terms of integration and other things that we'll cover in this session, then you can be really hamstrung. It could mean that you start well, but then, as I was saying before, business needs are changing faster than they ever have for a whole host of reasons. And so you need to retain much more control than perhaps you used to. So being chained in that way is a real challenge. In fact, I might bring up one quote of a CEO of Twilio. He sort of characterized the decision that we make as when we're buying IT or technology to support a business. It used to be that decision was, do I buy it? Oh, sorry, let me say that again. It's do I build it or do I buy it? So, and that's typically the decision we're all making. Do I build it internally or do I buy it? And that was traditionally what you'd do. But he sort of provocatively has said, well, do I build it or do I die as an organization? Because the pace at which our digitalization processes are going on means that the importance of those decisions has risen right up to being strategically imperative, to the point of it defining your competitiveness level. So that will apply to HR situations as well. So in terms of that impact, I think I've made a case for its pretty big impact for your business, but be interested to know what others think.
Yeah, maybe as we pull this up, just take a half step back, Lars, and just define what a roadmap is from a vendor standpoint. Just to make sure everybody's on the same page here.
Of course. So a roadmap is really giving you some visual visibility of what's coming next in later releases of the software. So, you'll be able to obviously look at and play with a current release, but then you should have access to some information about what's coming down the track and what's the areas of focus that the vendor's going to be putting into their next versions of the product, and how much transparency do you get on that? I think there's an element of need to ask quite detailed questions around that. I think it's worth just while people are responding to the poll is to what we find at Totara, being largely working with a whole global range of partners, is that the roadmap gets informed and filtered through like real world needs quite extensively. So we get quite an interesting range of feedback as to what needs to be developed and what the importance of that is. But the good news is, of course, you're not necessarily stuck with that at all, because you can work with partners, you can work with the software yourself. But we'll come on to that.
Yeah, without a doubt. This is, in my opinion, one of the areas that buyers forget to ask about while they're looking at different LMS solutions or learning solutions, and to really understand how important that roadmap is. Where does it come from? How is it communicated? How is the input collected? How are the features prioritized? What features are going to impact me or not? Those things, to have a good flow of communication and have that roadmap be dynamic and changing and building as a company evolves or a solution evolves, is so critical. And so just in general, as buyers or shoppers, when you do enter that phase at now or some point in the future, understanding, asking the vendor to communicate that and show how it is really a big difference between just buying a piece of software and buying a solution that's has their ear to the ground with their client base. And so we'll close this poll here and just to see what our audience says. But Well, again, I must have good poll questions as we seem to be smoothed across the different choices here. But you know, number one and number two is probably what I see most often in life. The vendor's not asking, or you're just not big enough. You know, so maybe you're with one of these big vendors, and you only have 2,000 or 200 or 5,000 learners, and getting somebody to answer your call is tough enough, let alone asking your advice on what's next in the product. But Ramontis, you managed as part of the team here the transition from one solution to another. One, we don't want to name them, protect the innocent, but an old lethargic big type system to the Totara application. Any insights on how visibility into the roadmap was beneficial to you or not beneficial to you before or now? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, with the overall vendor, I think the visibility was there, right? You can always see the roadmap. The only thing you cannot see there is the features you need. So Lars actually touched base really good on how the roadmaps work and how kind of Totara's way of having partners enhance it, right? With the old vendor, you can always vote, but you cannot vote for like the user base you have behind you to make a kind of noticeable sway into your side. And of course, it wasn't open source. So with not open source systems, there's always a problem, because if vendor cannot touch it, you cannot touch it either. There are certain ways that using HTML, CSS, JavaScript knowledge, you could work around it. But too much of these things on top of the underlying system is not a very good idea when it comes to long-term maintenance and support. So that's experience talking. And from Totara perspective, even if you don't have something on a roadmap or have imagine certain functionality in a different way, you can always talk to your partners and have something developed in the meanwhile. And if Totara likes it, they might include it for the others, so win-win. So I guess that's the comparison from my side.
Yeah, that's a big difference, because you could be talking about not just months, but sometimes years, as a stopgap to put a custom piece in there until the vendor catches up. So good point, Lars.
Indeed, and I think just to wrap up on some of the discussion there about the roadmap, here's a couple of things to maybe reflect on and ensure that you check in with all the conversations you have with vendors. Is what is that process for developing custom features? I mean, what is the roadmap? How much can I delve into the detail of that? What is the flexibility that arises around that, and how will custom features affect the ability to upgrade, say, a new version of the LMS? That's actually a very important balancing act to have. And what we do collectively, I think, as part of a global Totara community, as it were, with all our partners and customers, is that you'll see the development of some functionality in one place, and that can end up having some utility to the wider community, in which case that can find its way back into the core product, and in an accelerated pattern, because you get clarity around the use case, not just in a unilateral sort of one customer context. You sort of then have to generalize that out to a wider, more flexible set of functionality to meet multiple variants of that use case. I use the word variants, and it just makes me think of viruses. But
right,
yeah, but in a way, that's you have to think around the differentiations that are there to really enable the maximum number of customers to be able to benefit from it.
So think of an LMS roadmap as a vaccination to some LMS problems.
Well, a good one at least, and also having that flexibility in that process in place to deal with it.
Just one last comment real quick before you hit 5 on the roadmap. Practically, here's how this works in real life. If your whole reason of creating your LMS is to manage compliance, for example, and you look on a roadmap and you don't see any new compliance features, that's how it manifests itself. You could see social, you could see we're doing e-commerce or we're doing this, but it gives you a judge of what's important. Where are they spending their money? And they're only the vendors spending their money where their customers want them to spend their money. And so by aligning your business with the priorities on the roadmap, gives you a good lens to look through how important the developments and the enhancements that you want over time to do your job better are going to be represented. So there you have it. Lars, 5.
No, that's great. I think John, that what 5 represents is almost the thing you don't want to happen to your business as a result of some of the other things we've already been discussing. But if your LMS is actually slowing you down rather than propelling you forward in terms of building capability in your people and right across the business, then you're going to be in trouble, aren't you? So, I mean, I'm wondering out there in the audience, how do you feel? Can you respond at speed to those changing business requirements? And are you, that may not be one of the options here, but in the chat or a question maybe is, how are you seeing your changing business requirements happening at a faster rate? I'll be surprised if they weren't, but yeah, that's good
as
to know.
it turns out, if you can't respond, it because your LMS dogs you at every step along the way on that. But if you can, the last year is like the perfect example. Like if you were able to pivot out of last year unscathed, you're on the good side of the scale.
Indeed, it'd be worth telling a little story here while that poll is coming in. Just a quick one, because of the whole COVID reaction. Sort of the first quarter of that experience was probably the most dramatic in some parts of the world, and in Italy in particular. And one of our Totara customers there, which is the healthcare institute there in the National Healthcare Institute, they were typically serving training to 40,000 healthcare workers around the country. Within 1 month, they had to pivot that up to 450,000 to give out training around. It was COVID related, ventilator training, that type of thing. And the good news is they could, and we've seen that replicated in different parts of the world, different regions, because Totara is quite well used in the healthcare sector. So it enabled them to pivot very quickly to introduce, as you mentioned before, John, other audience coming in to need access to immediate training, which was contributing to saving lives.
Definitely. Wow, great case study there. Yeah, it looks like if there's such a thing as a bell curve, this is it. With sometimes being the answer in the middle of the curve there. So sometimes it's better than never. There you go. That's glass half full. Let's go right on to 6 in terms of time, Lars. Into adaptability. All right.
Okay, there's a few questions there just to reflect on as part of that. What you to avoid slowing down. But yeah, when it comes to the final point, really about choosing a learning platform that's going to be fit for purpose on a continual basis, then it has to be really adaptable. And the support that we would want to see to make it adaptable, can come in many different forms. But I think we were going to run a poll here, John.
There it is.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, about what sort of support is available to help you apply the available features in your LMS, because part of this is about your own knowledge of what it's capable of. And so it's not always down to the inflexibility of the platform. In fact, there can be deep features in there that are just difficult to grasp. So, the quality of the help documentation, the availability of product training, having some other community or access to others who are using the platform in different ways to learn from each other is really important. And third-party help. So all of those things, I would argue, are all very important.
Yeah.
So Romantis, what did your team? How do you implement upgrades and new features, and how do you, what did you rely on to help you support on that?
That's a very good question, and yeah, for the features, as mentioned in the very beginning, I mean, our user interface and user base requires very simple things. but we definitely don't use all the potential of the LMS right out of the box, and we're introducing features bit by bit. And I guess the first step is always internal, right? We have a lot of documentation, a lot of information, a lot of even plugins around the world based on Moodle systems and so on. So it's always first step internal, mockups, try and apply the functionality, try to find the right spot for it, where it goes, does it distract the current flow or not? Just figuring this out, apply some CSS, HTML, and these kind of things into the mix, and see if you need any more help to introduce that. And if you do, there's a second stage where you go to your partner and say, hey, maybe this could be done in this way how we want it. We have some code for it already. Maybe it will help, and so on. So this just kind of goes into those two directions. And of course, you have to be always aware of resources available on your team and your company, and on the partner side on these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, first step is always internal.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you. Is it just understanding as a buyer and a user where that support is coming from before you buy is is pretty critical, because it's easy to get into a free trial LMS, start the LMS up, and think that you can do it all on your shoulders, and maybe you can in phase one or when things are small. But one thing get big, where your help is coming from is not something you want to find out when there's a problem. It's something that you want to be thinking in advance. And so a lot of cases in our presentation today, it's technology is certainly part of it, but good forethought and good planning and good governance of your solution and good buying, is the second part of good technology that folds together. So there you have it.
Yeah.
Adaptability. Why does it matter?
Indeed. I mean, just to finish on that though, John, at Totara we have a site called the Totara.community. That's the URL, Totara.community, and that represents and provides a free place. Anyone listening to this and watching this can open up a free account, and you get access basically to an instance of the software itself, full of training about the software itself, with a community there that you can interact with, and access to the help documentation that supports it as well. So we're pleased to know that we've won an award. It's sort of in the wraps, but official announcement. But we're very delighted that that's been recognised by the wider industry as a service that supports a complex enterprise solution, really.
Wow,
So,
how innovative to use your LMS to teach about your LMS. That puts you in about 1% of LMS vendors for some reason.
Well, we like to call it drinking our own champagne. Right?
Eating your own dog food here across the pond.
Exactly. So, okay, so why does adaptability matter? I'll just I'll give you a very quick sort of whistle-stop tour of that. Before the police get me, you might hear that siren going by. I think like I've mentioned before, there's a wider context here, which is all over the news. You can't really escape it. In fact, I think very much from a US perspective, you've got your own federal plans, which may come through, that really talk to the skills agenda that is only growing. So the next 10 years are really critical in terms of reskilling. And this report from the World Economic Forum that was published just in October 2020 really points to that we've got millions and millions, if not approaching 1 billion people needing to retrain and reskill over that 10-year period. Wow. In all sorts of sectors. It's very large. Yeah, you can talk to different consultancies, they'll give you different big number, but it's a big number. What you're looking at on the screen, and I won't dwell on this long, is just the 10, well, it's not quite 10, it's the top. There are 10 skills that they recommend that people need to be building. So any learning and development sort of agenda should really be looking at how you're going to do this differently and better for your organization going forward. I've highlighted one, which is resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility, which are all 3 things that we've all had challenged over the past 12 months in particular, but that's not going away. You know, we need better ways to be adaptable individually as well, not just as teams or as organizations. And what we really need to be doing is trying to work towards this sort of vision almost of having an adaptability friendly workplace where you get this virtuous cycle of interactions here that probably you're all wishing you had universally. Maybe you do in your organizations, but it's certainly something that many organizations struggle with. You know, we don't have this virtuous cycle where in effect you've got the three key motivators really supporting you in the workplace, which is, you know, mastery, the ability to really build the skills in what you're good at, and to have the opportunity to keep developing them, autonomy, the space and time and confidence and psychological safety to actually exercise those skills well in your organization. And then also, you know, you're working in an organization where you've got a sense of common shared purpose. What we've done at Totara is to recognize those three researched motivators, and realize that you need to bring those things together. So typically in organizations, learning, performance management, engagement or collaboration or leadership development, a lot of these things are done in separate silos, even within an HR function in a large organization. So bringing them together into a single talent experience platform is something that we're really excited to make available. So it's not just about Totara Learn, which is our learning management platform. It's about collaborating with others, informal learning, creating, curating and collaborating together using an engagement platform like Totara Engage, together with Totara Perform, which is a performance management, continuous feedback, 360-degree feedback, and goal setting and the rest. So it's a really powerful way, I think, of bridging what are currently quite big gaps between these things, and actually by doing it together in flexible ways, it really makes us more adaptable and resilient as organizations going forward in the face of big changes. So we've heard from Western Union today, which is, thank you very much, and it's really, really great to hear their stories. There are other stories here, and there's a quick case study here from Educare of a similar size and scale, actually, 500,000 users, serving 6,000 customers across the plan there, but they moved from consolidating several proprietary platforms into one open solution, and that's transformed really the satisfaction levels that they had. And then on a slightly more focused basis, an association, professional association here in the UK, really looking at continuous development, and you can see how the collaborative innovation that goes around our Totara platform help them respond to changing requirements, both mandatory and also driven by professional development that was happening in the dental field as a whole. So sort of running out of time here. So John, if we have any questions, we may have a minute or two to cover them.
All right, well, we're out of time here for now. I've been answering questions along the way. And if I didn't answer your question, we'll follow up with you individually. I know some of you have some specific questions about Totara and even about APIs in general. So we'll make sure that we handle that. Thanks everybody for joining. If you want to click to the next slide quick, Lars, we have from a follow-up. So what did we cover today? Lots. We looked at things that you have to think about primarily, as you're evaluating LMS solutions, so that you don't have to think about it after you can't change anymore. And so some of those things are thinking about molding, thinking about speed, thinking about adaptability, thinking about your content, your integrations, and how your business can change, and looking at it and the roadmap of not where you're at just today, but where you're wanting to go, and considering all of that holistically as part of your process is easier said than done, but it is mandatory to not having to switch your LMS in the future. So thanks very much for tuning in, everybody. Tomas, Romantis, brilliant. Thank you again for joining us both on the podcast and the webinar. Outstanding story. One of the best stories of extended enterprise in the world. So great job. Lars, as always, I'm super impressed with you personally and your organization and everything you're doing. Thanks so much for joining me today. Audience from around the world, thanks for tuning in for a whole hour. We really appreciate it. As follow-up, we will send you a white paper that's been created, Tota created around this topic, so we could dig in maybe some or ancillary or complementary topics inside of that. And then I'll also send you access to the Talented Learning Center, where we'll have a recording of this teed up for you, as well as the podcast that Lars and Western Union has started on in the past. So we'll all that's coming your way soon. Thanks so much for joining us today, everybody, and we hope to see you on the 82nd next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in.
All right.